Welcome back to the channel. I'm the Fantasy Football Strategist. In today's video, I am giving you 5 late-round rookie running backs, all of which are one injury away from giving you fantasy production. Each of these running backs is being drafted in the 10th round or later in 2024 fantasy football. Please remember to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. The first player on this list is Rams rookie running back Blake Corum. So he's 5'8", 205 pounds. This does give him a 31.2 BMI, which is well above the 30.0 threshold for potentially being a bell cow running back. He goes to Sean McVay's scheme, which is fantastic. And if you've known the Rams for many years, at least back in the heydays of Todd Gurley and now Kyren Williams, it is a fantastic scheme for running back production. Now, historically, the Rams have just used one featured back whenever possible. And even though Kyren Williams had a fantastic season, they felt the need in the latter portion of the 3rd round to draft Blake Corum out of Michigan. So when we think about Blake Corum, he was a late declare. He did play his senior season. I do want to contextualize that, though, because he did have that nasty knee injury. He probably would have come out as a junior this past season if it weren't for that injury. And so it might have hurt his draft stock just a little bit, but he was still drafted in the 3rd round, and in college, he was an absolute bell cow. When we think about where Blake Corum is going, he is going off the board as the RB39 at the 1009. So essentially, all 32 other starting running backs are going ahead of him. And at that point, you are either drafting somebody who is in a committee or is a very valuable backup if they were able to get into the starting lineup, and especially on a regular basis. He's going off the board at the 1009 just after Ezekiel Elliott, who is going at the 1006. I think this is appropriate. He does have a tremendous amount of upside, but as the video title suggests, he is probably one injury away from giving you meaningful fantasy production. He's also going ahead of players like Jerome Ford and Chase Brown, both of which might give you more immediate production, although there have been reports that the Rams intend to somewhat split carries here in Los Angeles. But I strongly believe Blake Corum has way more potential upside than either of those running backs because he does have the build to be a bell cow running back, unlike Jerome Ford or Chase Brown. So when we think about Blake Corum, he's not one of those speed backs. He is actually a little bit elusive, but in terms of his raw speed, he doesn't really possess that. He ran a 4.53 40-yard dash, which gives him a 55th percentile speed score. He is 5'8", 205 pounds, which 205 pounds doesn't sound like it's that much, but when you are only 5'8", that does give you a 31.2 BMI. Then when we think about his college dominator, that's his total amount of yards and touchdowns for his team. His 33.3% college dominator was 79th percentile among running backs. He was the team this past season. Roman Wilson also performed well, and he went to the Steelers, so there's plenty of reason to believe that he's probably going to work out. But Blake Corum was essentially the team, if we're being honest here. And so what we like about that is, while yes, you don't want your players to have a ton of mileage, he has shown the ability to put the team on his back, which, if Kyren Williams were to get hurt, he would be more than able to do so. Then when we think about his college target share, his 7.7% target share was 60th percentile among college players, at the running back position at least. That's really, really good. See, in college, unless you are just an elite receiver, you generally aren't targeted quite as much. Same with tight ends, for instance. But to be a running back with a 7.7% target share and a 31.2 BMI that projects to potentially be a bell cow if necessary, this is exactly the kind of profile that you want to draft later in your fantasy football drafts for a sky-high amount of upside. When we think about his best traits, it's really his tackle breaking and his yards after contact. He ranked 10th in forced missed tackles this past season with 73, and he also ranked 11th in yards after contact this past season. All in all, he's kind of like a human bowling ball, but he is very, very agile as well. Really, if his speed was a little bit better, he would have been more highly regarded as a prospect coming out. And really, you can just take advantage of that because should he get the opportunity, he absolutely has the skills to take over the job and force at least a near even timeshare, if not potentially take the job overall. So when we think about the Rams roster, they have Matthew Stafford as their quarterback. It's good for the running backs because he's not going to be any semblance of a threat running the ball, which will lead to increased dump-offs when nobody's open downfield, which isn't as often as you would like, theoretically, at least from owning the running backs in fantasy football because he's such a masterful schemer. But it does at least remove the threat of him eating the rushing yards himself in dump-offs. But they do have two very, very good wide receivers in Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. The offense is going to generally funnel through them, at least the passing offense. They have Demarcus Robinson, who did admittedly have a little bit of touchdown luck this past season, but he was a solid contributor for you this past season. And Tyler Higbee's going to be kind of slow coming back. He did suffer an ACL tear at the end of this past season. They do have Colby Parkinson. We'll see if he amounts to anything. Really, this offense is going to funnel through the running back and top two receivers for the most part. And Blake Corum is going to be a tremendous value for you should starting running back Kyren Williams miss a substantial amount of time. When we think about Blake Corum's college production, it took him a little bit to really, really get going. He had a decent sophomore season, but he stepped up as the bell cow in his junior season and again in his senior season. And when you look at the receptions, he's not an exceptional receiving back, but he was used quite often in the passing game. He's definitely not a weapon in the passing game. He's just adequate there, but the Rams don't generally use the running backs more than just setting up screen plays, flat routes. They're not going to confuse him with Christian McCaffrey or anything, but overall, Blake Corum has the potential to have league-winning upside in the 10th round for you. Should Kyren Williams miss any substantial amount of time, you can treat Blake Corum as at the very least a mid to high-end running back too, with sky-high potential. The next player on this list is Dolphins rookie running back Jaylen Wright. So he's 5'11", 210. That does give him a 29.3 BMI, which obviously is below the 30.0 threshold that we would at least ideally prefer with our running backs to take over a lion's share of the carries and be a true bell cow. But because of the specific landing spot, I am not worried about that in any way, shape, or form. So he was drafted in the latter half of the 4th round, but here's the thing. The Dolphins traded up to ensure that they got Jaylen Wright. When you trade up in the draft for a running back, you generally have plans to use them. It's one of those expendable positions, at least in the eyes of coaches and the NFL in general, unfortunately. And so for them to bother trading up to make sure that they get this guy, they absolutely have plans for him in the future. So he's 21.3 years old, still quite young. He did not have a ton of wear and tear in college, which is going to leave a lot of tread on the tires. And so when we think about where he's going in drafts, he's being drafted as the RB44 overall at the 1206. This is after players like Zach Charbonnet and Chuba Hubbard, and ahead of the likes of J.K. Dobbins and Kendre Miller. I think this is a very appropriate ADP. Obviously, you want to draft players with a secure role right away before you draft players that potentially have upside. But ask yourself this. Would you prefer one of these Dolphins running backs or Chuba Hubbard? Right. So I would much prefer Jaylen Wright. And this landing spot is just absolutely ideal. So when we think about Jaylen Wright, he is the dash in a backfield, although he does bring just a little bit of power, especially, he converts speed to power as opposed to just being an overtly imposing running back like a Derrick Henry, for instance. He ran a 4.38 40-yard dash, which puts him in the 98th percentile among running backs, giving him a 114.1 speed score, which is in the 95th percentile among running backs. And he has a 131.6 burst score, which puts him also in the 95th percentile among running backs. So this guy is absolutely explosive. He is more of a straight line athlete at the running back position. He doesn't possess necessarily the best wiggle and juke move selection per se, although it's not as though he doesn't possess any wiggle. So when we think about how Tennessee plays, they generally like to have 4 wide receivers far near the boundary, really, leaving it wide open in the middle of the field, making it very challenging for defenses to stack the box. Jalen Wright actually faced just about the least stacked box percentage in college football. And when we look at his yards per carry of 7.4, which is, by the way, 95th percentile, I think that is part of it, is that the offense is more spread out, making it easier for them to gash defenses. But to his credit, he was able to do that. And he's very good at yards after contact because, as I said, he converts speed to power. Well, what do the Dolphins do? They spread you out. They'll use motion. It's just a tremendous offense, really. It's a derivative of the Shanahan offense, and it's Mike McDaniel's touch. They use a lot more motion than some of these Shanahan derivatives, but this is going to majorly fit Wright's profile. He had a 91.0 rushing grade in 2023, which is the best of his career. He also had a 4.35 mark for yards after contact, which is just him and his ability to drag defenders with him as he gets going and chugging along. And he also had 19 carries of 15-plus yards on only 136 attempts this past season. So all in all, he is exactly the type of running back we want in this scheme. He is a blazing straight-line running back who, just like Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert, make it very, very challenging and make defenses have to be accountable for their matchups. He, just like every one of these running backs in this backfield, possesses the ability to house a run from anywhere on the field. So when we look at the offense, Tua's the quarterback. He has no threat in the run game whatsoever in any way, shape, or form, which is perfect, just like with Blake Corum before. Should he be in the game, his quarterback isn't going to be stealing rushing touchdowns or rushing yards from him, and it's going to lead to an increase in receptions out of the backfield. So when we look at the running back room, they have Raheem Mostert, Devon Achane, and Jalen Wright. I will say, while they all possess blazing straight-line speed and are threats to take the ball to the crib on any single play from anywhere on the field, Jalen Wright is more of a one-for-one comparison to Raheem Mostert. They both convert speed to power. They're very tough to bring down once they get going. And he and Devon Achane in the future are going to form a lightning and thunder, although they're both lightning to a degree as well. So Raheem Mostert is signed currently through this season and next season. It's likely that he plays this season and he's probably cut by the team, which is probably why they drafted Jalen Wright. But he, being Jalen Wright, and Devon Achane are going to be tremendous for them in the future. And they're going to complement each other extremely well, just like Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane did this past season. And here's another thing. While we cannot predict injuries, Raheem Mostert has been injury-riddled throughout his entire career, and Devon Achane, what were our worries about him? That he was small, that he wouldn't be durable, and that he'd probably miss some time. Which of these fears did he alleviate this past season? None of them. There are reports that he's bulked up a little bit. He's still never going to be a full-time running back. He is still going to be part of a rotation. So then we ask ourselves, should either one of these two running backs miss time, what could we expect? Well, basically, Jalen Wright's a one-for-one replacement for Raheem Mostert. So if Raheem Mostert goes down, expect Jalen Wright to immediately take that exact role in this offense. But then he can also be a little bit more of a Devon Achane as well. So what you can theoretically expect in terms of total potential upside is like what a Raheem Mostert did this past season. Now, that would be the high end of the upside because you would have to have a very, very high touchdown rate to finish as the RB5. So while that's probably the absolute ceiling and incredibly unlikely to ever happen, he does have potential RB1 spike weeks in him should he be able to get Raheem Mostert type of carries in this offense, and he is a perfect scheme fit for the Dolphins. If Raheem Mostert goes down for a substantial amount of time, I would treat Jaylen Wright as a probably mid to high-end RB2 with, in a good matchup, or if he's able to break a long run for a touchdown at least, he could have a massive RB1 week anytime he's on the field for a substantial amount of snaps. So the third running back on this list is Green Bay Packers rookie Marshawn Lloyd. Coming out of USC, he is extremely explosive, very shifty, a very creative runner with a nasty assortment of juke moves, very, very elusive. He does, however, have fumbling issues, so he will have to get that cleaned up or really won't see the field very often if he's unable to, at least. But he was drafted in the latter half of the third round, so very solid draft capital, especially in what was supposed to be an extremely weak running back class, which, to be fair, at the very tip top in terms of elite talent, there wasn't any, but there are still very, very solid running backs in this class who can be very useful for you in fantasy football. He's 5'9", 220 pounds. That gives him a 32.5 BMI, which is absolutely elite. That is exactly what you want to see if you want a running back to potentially be able to take the lion's share of the workload out of the backfield. He's 22.6 years old, so he was a senior, late declare. That doesn't per se that doesn't really matter so much for running backs like it would for wide receivers, for instance. But I mean, you'd prefer your running backs to be a little bit younger coming out. But for 2024, you really don't give a crap. It's one season and he's a rookie, so obviously age is of no concern here. He's being drafted as the RB49 overall at the 1406. Players like Rico Dowdle and Ty Chandler are going ahead of him, which I think is kind of funny, to be honest with you, because Marshawn Lloyd is much more talented than any of these guys will ever be. He is, however, behind Josh Jacobs, so just like everybody on this list, he is one injury away from significant running back production. When we look at his metrics, he ran a 4.46 40-yard dash, which for being 5'9", 220 pounds is incredible, a 32.5 BMI. He ran a 4.46 40-yard dash, which is in the 87th percentile among running backs, and that gives him a 111.2 speed score, which is in the 93rd percentile among running backs. He also has 60th percentile burst score, so his ability to get going and in a hurry is very, very good. And he's also quite strong, as you can see his bench reps suggest. His yards per carry was 6.1 in college. That's 76th percentile. Very, very good. He was especially effective at USC with Caleb Williams, and Caleb Williams actually wanted him to come there. If Caleb Williams wants you to come to play with him, you're a very good player. Unless you're his personal best friend, anyways. But his college target share of 7.5% was also 59th percentile. So not only is he a big running back that has the frame and ability to take on a large workload, he also was used enough in college as a receiver. And by the way, he can run wheel routes out of the backfield. I haven't seen him run Texas routes, but he's good in the screen game. He can run flat routes. He's much closer to being a receiving weapon than being not useful or mid in the passing game, which does project well should he ever receive a large workload in the NFL. So should Jacobs incur an injury and be out for a substantial amount of time, Marshawn Lloyd has the ability to be a 3-down back and give you massive production, especially in this LaFleur offense that's a derivative of the Shanahan scheme. And you'll notice something, all three of the running backs I've mentioned so far are on offenses that are derivatives of the Shanahan scheme. It is the meta, it is the best offense right now. You could argue Shane Steichen's scheme is also quite effective, but there's a reason it's the meta. It's working, and Marshawn Lloyd is the kind of running back that's going to be very effective in this type of offense. He is absolutely shifty. He possesses the vision to see lanes out of nowhere. It is perilous sometimes because he'll try to do too much at times and lose yardage, which if he can get that cleaned up is good, because that will get you benched if you try to make the world out of every single run and just don't take what you're given sometimes. But I do trust that he'll be coached up there and make a little bit better decisions in the run game. By the way, he also ranked top 10 in yards per carry, breakaway run percentage, and elusiveness rating among running backs with at least 50 attempts. He also, by the way, broke 20-plus yard runs in 8 consecutive games this past season. He will destroy angles, and he's one of those running backs that he does accelerate to top speed relatively quickly, but when he gets going, and with that 32.5 BMI, he is a load to tackle in the open field. So when we think about the Green Bay offense, it's going to be really good. Jordan Love was just signed to an extension, so he has an above-average quarterback, or if he's the quarterback we saw in the second half of this past season at least, an above-average quarterback. Then their wide receiving room is kind of open. They have Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Dontavian Wicks, Jaden Reed, Bo Melton. Then in the tight end room, they have Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft. So no dominant offensive stars per se, but very useful players in their role. They did, however, sign Josh Jacobs to a 3-year deal that's really going to be more of a 2-year deal. And while he's probably going to be the bell cow for the most part when healthy, should he miss any time, Marshawn Lloyd's only competition is A.J. Dillon. So should Josh Jacobs miss an extended period of time, Marshawn Lloyd is the running back to own. He is much better than A.J. Dillon. A.J. Dillon should be one of the most physically imposing running backs in the game, and somehow he finds a way to not be that, despite being about 250 pounds. So anyways, Marshawn Lloyd possesses a ton of upside. When we look at his collegiate production, it is somewhat lackluster, but look at the receiving stats. So he had 18 receptions for 176 yards in his junior season, and then 13 for 232 this past season. And that's representative of a 6.7% and 4.6% target share, which are very, very solid numbers for a running back in college. As I said, it has the ability to run wheel routes out of the backfield, flat routes, screens, your normal assortment of routes, but he's very good and has soft hands. And he's dangerous in the open field with fantastic vision, tackle-breaking ability. His 4.46 40-yard dash does not do him justice. It is very challenging to tackle him from behind. So, should Josh Jacobs be injured for an extended period of time, I would treat Marshawn Lloyd as, once again, probably a mid RB2 to high-end RB2 on a weekly basis, but should he get the majority, if not all, of the touches out of the backfield in that scenario, he does have RB1 potential, because this guy is really talented. And in this LaFleur offense, they do like to target the running backs. As you know, Aaron Jones the past couple of seasons has had very nice reception totals when healthy. And by the way, at least this past season, Jordan Love targeted running backs the highest among any quarterback in terms of as his first read. So, if Marshawn Lloyd can get involved in the receiving game, he has a ton of upside. In the event Jacobs goes down, treat him as at least a mid RB2 with potential high-end RB2 to low-end RB1 upside with potential for huge boom weeks in this offense. The next player on this list is Jets rookie running back Braylon Allen. Coming out of Wisconsin, he's only 20.5 years old now. That's right, he was dominating in college as a 17-year-old freshman running back. He's 6'1", 235, with a 31.0 BMI, so just a huge running back, who obviously, looking at that BMI and just overall size, has the ability to put the load all on him as a featured back should the opportunity present itself. So he's behind Breece Hall, so obviously he does need Breece Hall to be out for an extended period of time to really be a fantasy contributor for you. But he's also being drafted as the running back 58 at the 17-10, so essentially the 18th round. Players like Elijah Mitchell and Bucky Irving are going ahead of him for some reason, none of which project to ever be featured backs, really. Anytime the 49ers have tried to make Mitchell a featured running back, he immediately gets hurt and has never, ever been trustworthy. Then Bucky Irving is tiny. He's relatively talented himself, but there's just no way to really project him, at least, to have the role that Braylon Allen would should the presumptive starter get hurt. He's also going ahead of the likes of Roschon Johnson and Dameon Pierce, so I feel his ADP is pretty appropriate. And should Breece Hall go down, boy, he has so much potential in this Aaron Rodgers-led offense. So when we look at his metrics, his 4.51 40-yard dash was 76th percentile among running backs, giving him a 113.6 speed score, which is in the 95th percentile. He did have one really long touchdown run at Wisconsin. He does kind of take a bit to get going, but then once he gets rumbling, it turns out it's quite challenging to tackle a 6'1", 235-pound running back. Your best bet is to just go for his ankles, and that's generally how he's tackled because you are not wrapping him up by any means. He is also incredibly strong, as you can see by his bench reps, and his 30.7 dominator rating, while being slightly under Blake Corum's 33.3%, is still 70th percentile, and shows that he was used as a bell cow in college, thus giving us the ability to project him as a presumptive bell cow, or at least that he would have the ability to, should Breece Hall get hurt. His collegiate yards per carry was also 6.1, which was 76th percentile as well. So very effective in college. Another fun fact is he had over 2,000 yards after contact in college. That's really impressive, and as you can see below, that's more than some of these running backs have had in their entire collegiate career. So he's a big force to be reckoned with in the open field, who's surprisingly nimble as a receiver. And there have been reports in camp that he's looked very good as a receiver. When Breece Hall was out a little bit ago, Braylon Allen was primarily the running back being used with the first team. Their other fifth-round pick running back was also getting some first-team reps, but should Breece Hall go down, it's really looking like Braylon Allen is the guy. When we look at the Jets roster, it should have been amazing this past season. Unfortunately, 4 snaps into the year, Aaron Rodgers was lost. Well, he's back. We'll see where he is this season. It's really hard to tell. Impossible, really. But reports from camp are that he's looked very sharp, and his connection with Garrett Wilson has been elite. So that is good news for Braylon Allen, should he get the opportunity to showcase his skills this season. As we discussed earlier, Breece Hall is the presumptive starter. He is an elite running back. In my opinion, he might be the best running back in the NFL. You could argue Christian McCaffrey, maybe Bijan Robinson, possibly Saquon Barkley, but he's absolutely up there, so he is going to be the bell cow. Then they have Garrett Wilson, who's a fantastic wide receiver. I personally think he's a top 5 actual talent, even though he's a fringe top 5 talent in fantasy this season, assuming the health of Aaron Rodgers at least. They have Mike Williams, at least the corpse of Mike Williams. We'll see if he does anything after this latest ACL tear. They also have Xavier Gibson. We'll see if he ends up being anything this season. They drafted Malachi Corley in the 3rd round. Aaron Rodgers wanted him, so we'll see. He's been called a baby Debo. He's generally going to be a short area slot receiver with good yards after contact ability, and he's essentially a running back at receiver. Then their tight end room is nothing to speak of, really. So when we look at his collegiate production, it was off the charts as a freshman. Then in his sophomore season, he broke out a little bit more as a receiver. He's not a tremendous receiver, but he's absolutely not a zero in the receiving game either. This past season, he did experience a little bit of a decline in his production. He did play in fewer games, but he really stepped up his receptions. He had 28 in his true junior season. And with him being a junior, and with him being an early declare, he does have a little bit less wear and tear than some running backs do out of college, such as Ray Davis, for instance. So when we think about Braylon Allen, I could see Braylon Allen being a low-end to mid RB2 with potential spike weeks if he has multi-touchdown games in this offense should Breece Hall go down. but he absolutely has the ability in an emergency to be their bell cow back and does have solid receiving skills for being so big. Should he get the opportunity, he's wonderful along the goal line and is easily going to punch in touchdowns. Don't be shocked, even if Breece Hall is healthy, if Braylon Allen does steal a touchdown or two here and there. And with his 17th round draft capital, that's almost 18th, snag him there because Bucky Irving and players like that are going ahead of him who do not have nearly the amount of potential upside as Braylon Allen. The final player on this list is 49ers running back Isaac Guerendo. So he's 6 foot 221, which gives him a perfect 30.0 BMI, a perfectly adequate size to be a bell cow running back. He was drafted in the 4th round. The 49ers, by the way, also traded up to draft him. So, as I said earlier with Jalen Wright, teams don't generally trade up to draft running backs. It's generally, while that has happened in this draft, it doesn't generally happen that much. But when it does, you don't do that if you're not going to use your running back. And despite the graphic here saying he's 0.0, he is 24 years old, which for Dynasty you would prefer him to be younger, but for redraft like we're talking about here, we don't care about that. He's going off the board as the RB68 at the 2012, so essentially the 21st round. Players like Alexander Mattison, Keaton Mitchell, Tank Bigsby, and Will Shipley are going ahead of him. None of these guys have anywhere remotely close to as much upside as Isaac Guerendo, and considering that none of those guys are going to have a for sure role, at this point you care about upside. You don't care about somebody potentially being a mid RB2. Isaac Guerendo will have a crazy amount of upside should Christian McCaffrey get hurt during the season. He is dealing with a calf strain right now, but it's not going to be too likely that really inhibits him from playing in the actual regular season. But being drafted as the RB68 behind the likes of Keaton Mitchell, and trust me, as a Ravens fan, I like Keaton Mitchell, but please, give me Isaac Guerendo. Are you serious? Fun fact, this guy is the 6th most athletic running back ever recorded at the Combine. So being 6 foot, 221 pounds with a 30.0 BMI, he ran a 4.33 40-yard dash, which is in the 99th percentile, giving him a 125.7 speed score, which is in the 100th percentile, with a 135.1 burst score, which is in the 98th percentile, and an 11.09 agility grade, which is in the 84th percentile. This guy is a super athlete. And one thing is, he generally was never used. See, actually, Braylon Allen ran him out of town in terms of being the overall starter, at least in his early career at Wisconsin. He did transfer to Louisville. But I really, on tape, don't understand why. I thought in Wisconsin that should have been much more of a timeshare. He has had soft tissue injuries here and there, and that is a worry. But his 6.1 college yards per carry were 77th percentile, and his 7.0 target share were in the 52nd percentile. So this guy projects as a top 10 all-time athletic back with the requisite size to be a bell cow, with an incredible yards per carry average in college, and an above-average target share in college. That is everything you want in a running back, and this guy's being drafted essentially in round 21. So when we think about his strengths, he has elite speed, elite acceleration. He does have very good vision for cutback lanes, just taking angles in general. He's creative as a ball carrier, and once he gets going, he is a freight train. If he can get past the linebackers, the safeties are not tackling this guy. They're just not big enough. Being 6 foot, 221 pounds with 4.33 40-yard dash speed, this guy is the definition of speed to power. Arm tackles do absolutely nothing against this guy. I understand that his collegiate production isn't going to wow you or anything, but I really don't understand how this guy went so low. And by the way, the 49ers did trade up to get him. So once again, you're going to want to use players that you trade up for in the draft, especially running backs. So should Christian McCaffrey get hurt, I don't see any way how he doesn't at least get some touches. When we look at the offense here, Brock Purdy is not a rushing threat in any way, shape, or form, which is going to lead to increased dump-offs. They definitely use design passing plays for the running backs in this scheme. Obviously, having Christian McCaffrey lends you to doing that, but they have Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk for now. They drafted Ricky Pearsall. They have George Kittle. It's an absolutely stacked unit, which, if McCaffrey were to go down, is going to make it still incredibly challenging for them to stop the rushing attack, at least from the defense's perspective. And he does have Elijah Mitchell in him, so while there is a caveat of maybe it's not the cleanest path to a projected RB1 role should this presumptive starter in Christian McCaffrey go down, Elijah Mitchell has never stayed healthy, and once again, we can't predict injuries, but he's never shown himself to be able to sustain a large workload in the NFL. Jordan Mason, I'm not worried about at all. He's looked good before, but none of these guys, besides McCaffrey, are anywhere near the athlete of Grendo. And Grendo's, by the way, is a much better athlete, actually, than Christian McCaffrey, while McCaffrey is more talented, obviously. But should McCaffrey go down, I could easily see Grendo taking the lion's share of snaps at the running back position. And if he just gets the opportunity, he could run away with the job, at least while McCaffrey's out. Now, when we look at his collegiate production, he didn't do too much, as 810 yards and 11 touchdowns in his senior season was his best year. But when you look at the numbers, he had 17 receptions for 115 yards as a junior and 22 for 234 this past season as a senior. That is very, very good for a running back in college. So this guy has the absolute athletic profile and overall size to take over as the main running back, as the bell cow, as well as the skills to do so, and the frame to do so. And if there's any kind of scheme that you want to be a part of, and if you've noticed anything, 4 now of these 5 running backs are in Shanahan-style schemes. It is absolutely conducive to fantasy success. And Isaac Grendo essentially going in the 21st round, by the way, after Clyde Edwards-Helaire, if you can believe that, is an absolute value. And should this guy see the field, he has mid RB2 to potentially low-end RB1 upside if he was able to get enough carries in this scheme. It's going to be impossible for defenses to stop the run game because of how many passing game options there are. Their playmakers are absolutely elite. Their coaching's elite. Their linemen aren't per se the best. The left side of the line with Trent Williams is the preferred half of the line. But Isaac Grendo absolutely has the athletic profile and skills necessary to be an absolute steal at the end of the 20th round. That's essentially a 21st round pick. Take him at the end of your drafts. It essentially costs you nothing as an upside play, and should McCaffrey miss time, Isaac Grendo could be a league winner if he's able to fight off the likes of Elijah Mitchell and Jordan Mason, which, if he's good, won't be any issue for him. So in review, we have Blake Corum of the Los Angeles Rams. He is one Kyren Williams injury away from being a potential league winner for you. The Rams' offense historically has been fantastic for running backs. There's a chance that he already gets split touches with Kyren Williams to begin with. At least that's what Sean McVay has said. So take advantage of that. He's being drafted after Ezekiel Elliott, and he's being drafted as one of the priority handcuff backup running backs, which is appropriate given his situation. He has sky-high potential, and he could have massive RB1 weeks if Kyren Williams was to go down and miss extended periods of time. Then you have Jalen Wright. He's going to be the one-for-one Raheem Mostert replacement in this Dolphins offense. We'll see what his role is right away, but if Mostert or A-Chain misses any amount of time, you will be able to plug and play Jalen Wright. He's extremely fast and is a fantastic straight-line athlete with fantastic yards after contact ability. He converts speed to power. He fits the slashing scheme of the Dolphins offense. Perfect fit, match made in heaven. Take him. He is going to be fantastic for you should either one of those guys miss time. Then you have Marshawn Lloyd. Once again, in a Shanahan-style offense, if Josh Jacobs goes down, this guy is going to be fantastic for you. Remember that Jordan Love was the highest running back first read quarterback in the NFL this past season, so he should have a solid target share if he is able to see the field, assuming a Josh Jacobs injury. He has the ability to be a solid RB2 for you with potential for massive RB1 weeks. Then you have Braylon Allen. He is behind Breece Hall, but if Breece Hall goes down in camp, when Breece Hall was out, Braylon Allen was taking the majority of the first team reps at running back. He's reportedly looked really good as a receiver as well. Being 6'1", 235 pounds with a 31 BMI, he absolutely has the requisite size to be a bell cow. He's going to be great from the goal line. Snag him late in your drafts and enjoy having a potential league winner at running back. It shouldn't shock anybody if he's a solid RB2 with potential low-end RB1 upside, and he does have the ability to have multi-touchdown games in an Aaron Rodgers offense. Then you have Isaac Guerendo. He's being drafted essentially in the 21st round after players like Clyde Edwards-Helaire. This guy's the 6th most athletic running back ever recorded in the NFL with a 100th percentile speed score. He fits the Shanahan scheme perfectly. He is one Christian McCaffrey injury away from potentially being a league winner for you, and he's essentially free. He is probably going to be one of the last players on your roster with much more upside than players like Edwards-Helaire. So snag any one of these running backs at their respective ADP and enjoy your potential lottery ticket towards a league-winning running back. So what do you think? Do you think these guys are values at their ADP? Do you not like the value? Do you agree with my assessments about their upside? Please let me know in the comments section. With that being said, I'm the Fantasy Football Strategist, your NFL breaking news source, and the Dynasty and Redraft implications behind said breaking news. I am building a library of information with which you can use to dominate your Redraft and Dynasty leagues in 2024 and beyond. Please remember to like and subscribe. It would mean the absolute world to me. Thank you and have a good day.